Ghosts, ghouls, and candy. What's not to like about Halloween? It is celebrated on October 31st every year, and for many, it means late nights of trick or treating, watching scary movies, and partying with friends and family. But where did Halloween originate from? What about the many traditions associated with it? Today, we will look at 13 of the common traditions and origins of this spooky celebration. The origins of Halloween date back more than 2,000 years to the Celtic festival of Samhain and was celebrated as their new year on November 1st. This day marked the end of summer and the harvest. It also marked the beginning of the dark, cold winter months that was often associated with death. The Celts believed that on the night before the new year, the veil between the living and the dead was at its thinnest, and that the spirits of the dead returned to earth to cause mischief. They also believed that, in addition to damaging crops and causing trouble, the presence of these spirits also made it easier for the Druids, Celtic priests, to make predictions about the future, which was a source of comfort for many during the long, dark winter. To commemorate the event, large bonfires were built where people would gather to burn crops and animal sacrifices to their gods. The Celts also dressed in costumes consisting of animal heads and skins as protection from the spirits. The next day, hearth fires that had been extinguished the day before were relit from the sacred bonfire to help protect them during the coming winter. Around 43 AD, the Roman Empire conquered most of the Celtic territory. Over the course of 400 years, they ruled these lands. Two Roman festivals were combined with the traditional Celtic celebrations of Samhain. Feralia, a day in late October the Romans commemorated the passing of the dead, was added to the Celtic celebration, as well as the day they honored Pomona, the Roman goddess of fruit, trees, and whose symbol was the apple. In May of 609 AD, Pope Boniface IV dedicated the Pantheon in Rome in honor of all Christian martyrs, and All Martyrs' Day was established in the Western Church. Later, Pope Gregory II expanded the festival to include All Saints and moved the observance from May 13th to November 1st. It is believed by many today that the Church was attempting to replace the Celtic festival of Samhain with the Church-sanctioned holiday. Around the 9th century, Christian influence had spread into the Celtic lands and blended and or replaced older Celtic rites. In 1000 AD, the Church made November 1st All Saints' Day to honor all the dead. All Saints' Day was celebrated similar to Samhain, with large bonfires and costumes such as saints, angels, and devils. All Saints' Day was also called All Hallows or All Hallowmas, and the night before was called All Hallows' Eve, eventually being called Halloween. Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burning, cauldron bubble, fillet of finny snake, in the cauldron boil and bake, eye of newt and toe of frog, wool of bat and tongue of dog, adder's fork and blind worm's sting, lizard's leg and hallet's wing, for a charm of powerful trouble, like hell broth boil and bubble. Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble, scale of dragon, tooth of wolf, witch's mummy, maw and gulf, of the raven, salt sea shark, root of hemlock digs in the dark, liver of blasphemed Jew, gall of goat and slips a ewe, silvered in the moon's eclipse, noose of Turk and Tartar's lips, finger at birth strangled babe, ditched and delivered by the drave. Make the gruel thick and slab, add thereto a tiger's cauldron, 4 ingredients of her cauldron. Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. In the Celtic culture, where many traditions of Halloween were derived from, witches were supernatural female healers. The word witch comes from Wicca, which means wise one. When Christianity spread and combined with the Celtic traditions, anything supernatural became feared and avoided, including witches. Healing, which was once considered helpful, was now seen by the church as pagan worship and evil magic. Christianity considered witchcraft detestable to the Lord, and witches became supernatural symbols of sorcery and evil. With their long history associated with Halloween, there are many legends involving them. Legends often tell of witches gathering twice a year when the seasons change, on April 30th, the eve of May Day, and October 31st, All Hallows Eve. It is said that they would gather on these nights to celebrate with the devil. There are some legends that say to meet a witch, you must put your clothes on wrong side out and walk backwards on Halloween. Then, at midnight, you will meet a witch.
Hey Mom, how did witches become associated with broom flying?
Well, the association between witches and brooms may have roots in the Celtic fertility ritual where the royal farmers would leap and dance astride poles, pitchforks, or brooms in the full moon light to encourage the growth of crops. The broomstick dance became confused with accounts of witches flying through the night on their way to orgies or other illicit meetings. The witch symbol is still one of the most traditional Halloween images, and the silhouette of a witch riding through a full moon is one of the most popular Halloween images. Connections between humans and cats date back to the earliest civilizations, such as ancient Egypt, where they were divine symbols, and in Greek mythology, the goddess Hecate was the goddess of magic, sorcery, the moon, and witchcraft. She was said to have had a cat as both a pet and an assistant of sorts. Around the 13th century, black cats became associated with the occult when a church document from Pope Gregory IX was issued on June 13, 1233. In the document, black cats were declared an incarnation of Satan. This marked the beginning of the Inquisition and the church-sanctioned heretic or witch hunts. In medieval France and Spain, black cats were believed to bring bad luck and curses to anyone they came near, as well as being associated with witchcraft. In medieval Germany, it was believed that if a black cat crossed your path from left to right, you would be cursed. When the Puritans came to the United States, they brought with them many of their beliefs and traditions, including those related to witches and black cats. They actively persecuted black cats, along with anyone they believed was a witch. One practice the Puritans had was that on Shrove Tuesday, black cats were burnt to help protect the home from fire. By the time the witch hunts ended in the United States, black cats were already cemented in the legends alongside witches. Today, black cats, along with witches, are traditional Halloween symbols. Bats and Halloween go together like candy and Halloween.
But why?
There are several theories on how this flying mammal became associated with the spooky holiday. One theory suggests that because bats are nocturnal, after all, anything dark is spooky, right? Nocturnal animals have often been associated with death, darkness, and evil because they engage in mysterious activities in the dark. They have been cloaked in superstition since ancient times. The combination of their dark colors and cryptic nighttime activities induced a sense of awe and fear when the only lights at night were from fires or candles. Bats have also been associated with the underworld and death, which also has roots in the Celtic festival of Samhain. Even centuries before this, bats were feared because they frequently lived underground in caves, which was considered an entrance to the underworld. When bats were first seen lapping up the blood of cattle in Central and Southern America, they were branded vampires. The idea of bats being vampires really took hold when Bram Stoker's Dracula depicted vampires as turning into bats. It was also believed that witches worshipped horned figures with wings. It was also believed that they used the bat blood in their flying concoctions. Another suggestion is that during the Celtic festival, when the bonfires were lit, the fires attracted bugs, which in turn attracted the bats. When the Scottish and Irish immigrants came to the United States, they witnessed the yearly migration of bats during their celebration. Bats have continued to be associated with Halloween since. What Halloween would be complete without a few spiders around?
But how did they become connected with the holiday?
The main reason these creepy critters are connected to Halloween is because they are also connected to witches. Spiders were believed to be one of the evil companions of witches during medieval times, along with black cats, rats, and bats. Another reason is because the furry, eight-legged creatures are usually found naturally throughout many places most people find scary, including spooky houses, graveyards, and caves. Generally, spiders prefer to live in dark places. In many countries around the world, they are believed to be mystical creatures because of their web making skills. Legends often describe them as storytellers and oracles of fate, wealth, and even death. There are also many superstitions associated with spiders. One, if a white spider has set up a home above your bed, you will have good luck, but if it's a black spider, you will have bad luck. If a spider falls into a lit candle and is burned, then witches are near. Seeing a spider in your home means good fortune is heading your way. The bigger the spider, the bigger the reward. Stepping on a spider will result in a downpour of rain. And taking a spider with syrup cures a fever. I personally wouldn't try this one. Consulting your doctor is the better choice. After all, it's just a superstition. Halloween, the season for creepy and spooky traditions, right? Did you know that some of these traditions have to do with love? Many of the older, lesser known traditions of Halloween had to do with helping young women predict who their future husbands would be. In 18th century Ireland, a matchmaking cook would bury a ring in mashed potatoes and serve it Halloween night, hoping to bring true love to the one who finds it. In Scotland, fortune tellers would have young women name each hazelnut for each of her suitors, then toss them into a fire. The nut that burnt to ash instead of popping would represent the girl's future husband. In some versions of this legend, the nut that burnt to ash was the love that would not last. Another legend says that if a young woman ate a concoction of walnuts, hazelnuts, and nutmeg before going to bed on Halloween night, she would dream of her future husband. There's also a ritual that has a young woman toss apple peels over her shoulders, hoping they would fall into the floor in the shape of her future husband's initials. Some women would look at an egg yolk floating in a bowl of water while standing in front of a mirror in a darkened room holding a candle, while also looking over her shoulder for her future husband's face. Some more competitive rituals at Halloween parties are the first guest to find a burr on a chestnut hunt would be the first to marry, or the first successful apple bobber will be the first down the aisle. Halloween decorations have seen a real uptick in recent years. Now it is common to see entire neighborhoods decorated with a variety of spooky decorations.
But how did this start?
The origins of Halloween date back thousands of years to the Celtic festival of Samhain, where it is believed that the spirits of the dead would return to menace the living. When Christianity was introduced, many of the Samhain traditions were included in the Catholic holiday All Saints' Day and have evolved since. When Halloween made its way to the United States with the Scottish and Irish immigrants in the mid 1800s, they brought with them their traditions. By the early 1900s, Halloween had gained popularity, but not as the same kid-friendly holiday we all know today. Halloween during this era was mostly for adults, a good excuse to have a party and, of course, decorate. Between 1912 and 1934, the Denison Paper Company published a catalog called Denison's Boogie Book, full of suggestions for throwing the perfect Halloween party with all of their products. Most decorations described in the book were intended to be disposable, made of crepe paper and paper cutouts. It wasn't until recently that people began to think of Halloween decorations like Christmas decorations, something to be stored away and brought back again year after year. The rise of trick-or-treating in the 1950s coincided with the move towards more kid-friendly decorations, less creepy and more cutesy. In 1958, Mamie Eisenhower decorated the White House for the first time, which gave Halloween decorations a sort of national seal of approval. Today, Halloween is bigger than ever, decorations more elaborate, and many of the disposable decorations have been replaced with permanent options including plastic skeletons, lights, and even Halloween inflatables. Jack-o'-lanterns have been a part of Halloween for centuries and were originally made from turnips and potatoes. But the name comes from an Irish legend about a man named Stingy Jack. According to legend, Stingy Jack invited the devil to have a drink with him, but refused to pay for it. He convinced the devil to turn himself into coin that Jack could use to buy their drinks. When the devil changed, Jack decided to keep the money instead and put it into his pocket next to a silver cross that prevented the devil from changing back. Eventually, Jack freed the devil under the condition he would not bother Jack for 1 year, and if Jack should die, he would not claim his soul. The devil agreed. The next year, Jack tricked the devil again by convincing him to climb a tree and pick a piece of fruit. While up in the tree, Jack carved a cross onto the bark so he could not come back down. He made the devil promise not to bother him for 10 more years before freeing him. Soon after, Jack died. According to legends, God would not allow Jack into heaven, and the devil, still upset by his tricks and keeping his word, would not claim Jack's soul. He instead sent Jack off into the dark of night with only a burning coal to light his way. Jack then put the coal into a carved out turnip and has been wandering the earth since. The Irish then began to call the ghostly figure Jack of the Lantern, eventually simply jack-o'-lantern. People of Ireland and Scotland began making their own versions of Jack's lantern by carving scary faces into turnips and potatoes and putting them in their windows or on their doorsteps to scare away Stingy Jack and other evil spirits. In England, they used large beets to do this. When the immigrants came to the United States, they brought the tradition with them and soon found the native fruit pumpkins made the perfect jack-o'-lanterns. The Celts believed that during Samhain, the veil between the living and the dead was at its thinnest, resulting in supernatural mischief. Some people of that time made offerings of treats and food to the gods for protection, while others wore disguises of animal skins and heads to blend into the spirit world. When Christianity adopted the holiday, many traditions were carried over, including costumes. During All Saints celebrations, people would dress as saints and gather together. During medieval times, people dressed up as souls of the dead and went house to house gathering treats called soul cakes. And this tradition was known as souling. From the late 15th century, people started dressing in spooky costumes of winter spirits or demons and would travel from home to home reciting verses and songs in exchange for food. This was known as mumming. When the Irish and Scottish immigrants began arriving in the United States in the 18th century, their traditions and superstitions and costumes came with them. Once Halloween entered American culture, its popularity quickly spread, and by the 1930s, annual Halloween masquerades were common. During the time, costumes began to be influenced by pop culture. It was also around this time the J. Halpern Company, better known as Halco, began licensing fictional characters like Popeye, Olive Oyl, Little Orphan Annie, and Mickey Mouse, which led to the holiday to become commercialized. Haunted houses date back to 19th century London when, in 1802, Marie Tussaud shocked British audiences with her wax sculptures of decapitated French figures like King Louis XVI, Marie Antoinette, Marat, and Robespierre. The likeness of these sculptures was remarkable, and for good reason. Tussaud created death masks of the French Revolution's many guillotine victims. When she set up her exhibit permanently in London, she called it the Chamber of Horrors, and that name stuck to the Wax Museum today. Around the turn of the 20th century in Paris, the Grand Guignol Theatre became famous for its on-stage depiction of graphic dismemberments. The director, Max Murray, often boasted that he judged each performance by the number of people who passed out shocked. By 1915, an English fairground in Liphook opened the first ghost house, and the public's appetite for horror continued to pick up. In the United States, Halloween-themed haunted houses first appeared during the Great Depression as a way to distract young tricksters whose pranks had escalated to property damage, vandalism, and harassments. The first haunted houses were primitive and often done by groups of families who would decorate their basements and have house-to-house parties where kids could spook themselves, going from basement to basement with various scary scenes. The haunted house finally became an icon around 1969 when Walt Disney opened the Haunted Mansion attraction. Within a few years, haunted houses had spread across the country and have evolved since. Bobbing for apples has been a Halloween tradition for hundreds of years. although its origins is more rooted with love and romance. But because apples are harvested in autumn, they became linked to Halloween. It began as a British courting ritual with several variations. In one version, each apple was assigned to a potential mate. The bobber would try to bite into the apple named for the man she desired. If it took her one try, the couple were destined for love. If it took her 2 tries, he would court her, but their love wouldn't last. If it took her 3 tries, their love was doomed. In another version, it was a race to be the first one to bite an apple. The one who succeeded would be the first to marry. A superstition related to the apple says that if a girl puts an apple she bit under her pillow, she would see her future soulmate in her dreams. The tradition of bobbing for apples began to decline by the 1800s, and it was only common in Ireland. As Americans began exploring their roots, they brought the tradition back as a game for both children and adults at Halloween parties. Another apple game that is no longer in practice, and for good reason, is called Snap Apple. In the game, an apple is speared on one end of a stick. On the other end is a lit candle. The stick is then spun around, and the goal is to take a bite of the apple while trying to avoid the hot candle. That game is definitely not one to take lightly and should probably be avoided. Trick-or-treating is a tradition in the United States and some other countries where children will set out on Halloween night in costume, going door to door asking for treats. This current Halloween tradition has actually been around in the current form for more than a century, but its origins, although somewhat murky, can be traced from the ancient Celtic festivals, early Roman Catholic holidays, medieval practices, and even British politics. During the Celtic celebration of Samhain, the people would dress themselves in costumes of animal heads and skins to drive away phantom visitors. They would also set up tables where they would leave food to placate any unwelcome spirits. In later centuries, people began dressing as ghosts, demons, and other creatures, often performing tricks in exchange for food and drink. This tradition was known as mumming and dates back to the Middle Ages. By the 9th century, when Christianity had spread, the Celtic and Christian traditions blended. It is during this time poor people would visit houses of the wealthier families the night before All Hallows Day and receive pastries called soul cakes in exchange for a promise to pray for the souls of the homeowner's dead relatives. This was known as souling and would later be taken up by children who would go door to door asking for gifts such as food, money, and ale. In Scotland and Ireland, young people participated in guising, a tradition where they would dress up in costume, go door to door accepting offerings from the household. Instead of pledging a prayer for the dead, they would sing a song, recite a poem, tell jokes, or perform tricks before receiving their treat, which was usually fruit, nuts, or coins. So what's your favorite Halloween tradition? Comment below. I would love to hear of other spooky Halloween pastimes.